And then I'm going to pass it over to Kelly.
Okay, great. Can everyone hear me okay? I barely see the tops of your heads. I'm going to move it down a little. Hopefully that's a good. So first of all, just the definitions. When we look at sexual assault, overall is considered an umbrella term that includes a wide range of victimizations, distinct from rape or attempted rape. It is thus important to understand how it's defined in different systems. So we'll see different terminology in the legal system, anti-violence, etc., and by different individuals. And while sexual assault is not sexual in nature, it's not. While it is sexual in nature, it's not necessarily about sex. The underlying motivation is often power. Yet this can be jumbled by cultural messaging that conflates sexual desire and power. So, so how do we talk about sexual violence? And I guess before we continue to move forward, I want to take a moment to think about the complexity of survivors. There is no one standard view or reaction. And it is very important because we often expect a survivor to show up and show their survivorness in a way that we view as acceptable. And that's simply not the reality. There are a lot of variations of how people show themselves to us, and they can be at various stages of that trauma. So all survivors are going to be different. And I would challenge you to think outside the box and understand that there is no, one cookie cutter way of working with survivors. And to keep in mind that there's a line between supporting a survivor and trying to walk over them and take control. And that's really what advocating is all about versus doing it for them, right? So we have to help those who are working to find their own voice and support them and just help them through that whole process. And this can be very difficult at times, but it's important that we really understand we've got to meet them really where they're at. And there are no limitations on the impact of trauma. It has the strength and ability to impact every aspect of someone's life. So it may not look what we would think it would. We have to look at our own biases as well and examine whether it is us that is creating the disconnect or if it is the trauma that they are experiencing when you feel or see a lack of connection. And it also may be that a survivor is not ready to accept your help. And I mentioned this as you start to work with survivors. So just on the slide, every survivor will respond differently to an assault. Therefore, again, treat all of our clients as unique individuals with unique needs. The survivor and victim are often used interchangeably. You'll see victim used a lot in the legal and criminal justice system. We try many times to use survivor, but really it comes down to respecting the survivor's choice of language. And mirror their language as best you can. Sorry. Okay, and then true or false. So one number, are we going to, I don't know if we're going to vote on this, Abigail, but I'm going to go through.
So, yeah.
No?
So if,
Oh, yes.
Kelly's going to read the sentence, and then if you think it's true, you'll give a thumbs up, whether you just do that yourself or the reactions on Zoom. And if it's false, then you'll do thumbs down or whatever reaction on Zoom is false. And then Kelly will then give the answer and provide more info with it.
Okay. Okay, so when we go through the very first one, is sexual assault is an act of lust and passion that can't be controlled. True or false? And you're going to have to tell me, Abigail, when all the votes are in, because I can't see. I don't think.
You could just give them like 5 seconds and then,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. but
Okay.
they all got it right. Good job.
Okay, awesome. I am seeing some thumbs. Rape, the second one is rape has the highest annual victim costs at 127 billion per year. And I guess I didn't get the answer in the last one, but the first one was false, like you said, and sexual assault is about power and control and is not motivated by sexual gratification. So that was number one. So number two that we just read, everyone's vote is in. That is true. As of 2008, likely higher now, this excludes child sexual assault. It has been estimated that each sexual assault costs approximately $150,000. Probably need to boost that as well. Costs to society include expenses to the criminal justice system, social costs associated with fear of crime, and private security expenditures. Society also directly bears the costs of crime, which are reimbursed by insurance coverage. To the victims, many of the costs are non-monetary losses, such as fear, pain, suffering, and lost quality of life. Delisi M. murder by numbers, monetary costs imposed by a sample of homicide offenders is the source reference. So number three, a lot of survivors lie about being raped or give false reports. Okay, correct. That is false. Only 2 to 8% of all rapes are falsely reported, the same percentage as for other felonies. And number four is most rapes are committed by strangers. And that is false. Most sexual assaults are committed by someone the victim knows. Studies show that approximately 80% of the people reporting sexual assaults knew their assailants. Number five, a person cannot sexually assault their partner or spouse. Okay, that is false. Nearly 1 in 10 women have experienced rape by an intimate partner in their lifetime. And men can be sexually assaulted. Number 6, sorry. True, men can be sexually assaulted. Men are victims of sexual assault. It is estimated that 1 out of 10 men will be sexually assaulted during his lifetime. Number 7, people with disabilities are at low risk for sexual assault. That's correct. False. People with disabilities are victims of sexual assault twice as much as people without disabilities, in fact. And lastly, if a survivor of sexual assault does not fight back, they must have thought the assault was not that bad or they wanted it. Some of these are hard to even read. Okay, false. Correct. Many survivors experience tonic immobility or a freeze response during an assault where they physically cannot move or speak. So myths about rape are widespread and believed by all types of people. You likely hold some misconceptions about sexual assault. That is okay. The point is to be aware of them and unlearn misinformation that is so prevalent in society. Okay. All right. I'm going to read it from the screen. Okay, so why does this matter? So these myths are used to shift focus onto the victim and away from the perpetrator, therefore blaming the victim. Myths, lies, and stereotypes enable perpetrators to deny, minimize, and excuse their behavior. And finally, main myth that plays into this is that the victim is at fault in some way. Okay. So why do we believe these myths? One, it allows us to distance ourselves from the victims and believe it could never happen to us or our friends or family. Another is they remove feelings of guilt from ourselves and shifts it onto survivors. And however, this does end up reinforcing the belief that rape is normal or inevitable. An example of this, which we will learn more about, is in child abuse. It is not out of the norm to hear when speaking with a parent, family taking sides. Explained due to society, due to society we live in, it is often easier to believe that someone, a survivor, would lie than to allow ourselves to believe that someone we know and trust would be capable of doing such a thing. It is very rare that children lie about the sexual abuse of adults or adults. Sorry. Okay, and then excuses. Perpetrators are sometimes excused for their behavior. And some examples of this. You want to ask the group, Abigail, or?
Yeah, just so this is one of those group discussion times. So just from your pre-learning or from, what you already like have knowledge in, what are some examples of excuses that perpetrators sometimes use or that are used for them?
Oh, I see a hand up if
Go ahead.
okay.
Yeah, so we can use the hand feature, but also I would just unmute and talk. Yes, so why don't we do Loren, Brady, and then I think Kayla also had her hand up. So we'll go in that order for now.
No worries. I just always put my hand up knowing that someone will jump in eventually first. A lot of excuses is that I can think of. The first one is I drank too much or I was intoxicated.
I was gonna say similar to that, and then the whole culture of like victim blaming of they were wearing this or like they were at that party. To Lauren's idea of like, well, we were both intoxicated or we were both on drugs, stuff like that.
I was also going to go along the line of like victim blaming, like that person, they were wearing blah, blah, blah. So, and that made the person want to do that to them because they were wearing what they were wearing.
So I was also going to say, in terms of the where it's a partner, like an intimate partner, that would, probably be in many cases easier to excuse than to acknowledge that, hey, maybe this person I'm with is violent and I need to leave them.
Yeah, absolutely.
One I always think of too is, sorry, Brady, I could just keep interrupting with you. Is things like you wanted it before, or you said yes originally, or even just like I took you out, so you owe it to me.
Yeah. And another one is like, well, they were sorry, they apologized, they were nice after. I think that's often with domestic or like with someone you know.
I know like other family members sticking up for perpetrator if they're not capable of this or that's not like them.
Yeah, that reminded me of the idea of like, oh, but they're like such a good person. Like there's no way they could do
Or he
that.
didn't know any better, she didn't know any better.
Yeah. Wow. These are great. I think you covered all of them. I've got a offender victim was drunk. They let him on. They were friends, flirting. What were they wearing? They were married. It's not rape. That was another one, but intimate partner kind of captured that. He was young. He is so successful. So, I mean,
Oh, I have one more.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
One more. They didn't say no.
Yeah.
That's the big one.
Explicitly say no. Yeah. Oh, these are great. Okay, yeah, that's a good segue to consent. Look at that. So consent, first of all, it must be freely given to sexual activities at the time of the act. What does consent look like? And someone who is drunk, drugged, or incapacitated cannot legally give consent. And why not? And you know, in society, we learn no means no when we were in school, sex education, small amounts in the media. They were passed out drunk and couldn't say no. But it would be very powerful to learn that yes means yes in society, and it has to be an affirmative yes. You must have a verbal permission of a yes. Taking off condom in the middle of sex and not disclosing, say STI or HIV status is not informed consent either. And really it's, there's an acronym called FRIES, FRIES, and it must be freely given, must be reversible, so anyone can change their mind. It must be informed. It must be enthusiastic. When it comes to sex, you should only do things that you want to do, not things that you feel you are expected or obligated to do. And it should be very specific. Saying yes to one thing, like going to the bedroom to make out, does not mean that you've given permission to do other things like full-on sex or other things that you don't want to do. So, okay. And then in the media, how does the media, schools, law enforcement, and hospital personnel, and we ourselves, perpetuate the rape culture? So reflecting from pre-learning, what comes to mind? We would look at aspects of our lives that contribute to and make up rape culture. All the aspects, when combined, show a comprehensive picture of how and why sexual assault continues to be tolerated and even encouraged in our society. It's why sexual violence continues to persist. So what are some of these examples? Can I open it up to you guys again?
I think of things like really harsh dress codes, when everyone's bodies look very, very different and everyone's different sizes and different heights, and people are treated differently based on how they dress and differently because of their body. And of course that intersects with other things like race, and disability status and stuff like that. But I think that's a really large thing to see in the media and schools and places of work.
That's great.
I think something else is that, like, you know, just saying, oh, that's just how that person is. They don't mean any harm of it, and they could be starting down that trail of sexual harassment and then just going down from there. But it just gets excused by family, friends, coworkers, whatever, because that's just how they are.
I've heard it called the Uncle Tommy syndrome. Everyone has an Uncle Tommy.
I think this is a little bit harder to quantify, but I think that we know that there are cases where it's more likely to be reported, maybe with certain socioeconomic groups. And so just the fact that there are so many people who don't report because of fear of law enforcement or, not being taken seriously. So I think just the fact that we have a culture in which it's got such, a low reporting rate is probably a direct outcome of that rape culture.
I think also law enforcement and even like prosecutors and stuff saying, it's he said, she said. There's not much we can do about it. I think that kind of perpetuates what's the point of even speaking up?
Yeah, great. Well, once again, did someone have another one?
Oh, I was
Sorry.
just gonna say, I also think that media also plays really well into like this false presentation of how fastly all of it comes to when it comes to like law enforcement. I think a lot of people think that like these activities happen and then they're gonna get justice so fast, or like even DNA results back or anything like that, and that's just not standard.
Yeah. Very true. Yeah. Anyone else?
Perpetrator perpetrators are probably less likely to worry about being actually prosecuted and, held to account for this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, once again, you guys covered really all the bases, I think, on this. The street harassment is where I think we did was, sexual, gender-based, bias-motivated harassment that takes place in public spaces like the street, the supermarket, and the social media we use every day. And at its core is a power dynamic. Street harassment punishes women, LGBTQ plus people, and other marginalized groups for being themselves in the world. Street harassment is not about sexual gratification, it's about power, putting people in their place. And then the dress codes, covered that. Women not allowed to wear tank tops, and here reasons because it's inappropriate and provokes boys. Also inadequate sexual education in schools, such as abstinence only. Large movement. There was a large movement in Washington around this recent legislation. And then questions that victims are asked over and over again in the criminal justice system. We will discuss this more on why these questions are necessary to ask due to our society and how we look at after a sexual assault. And things like, why didn't you scream? Why did you go to the house? Why were you drinking, drunk, high? Other questions. I just don't believe they would do that. Do you understand how this will affect their life? Things like that. And then I'm looking at the media. Men must be strong, no emotions. Girls must try to get the boys' attention at all costs and solely focus on their body. Disney princesses must seek the help of a man and be overly fond, and ads, and then ads that are sexualization for young girls. So,
Thank you,
okay.
Kelly.
Yeah. Oh, that's you now.
Yeah. Yes, one last one too. I don't know how many of you guys remember this or have read like her book or anything, but the Chanel Miller, who was assaulted by Brock Turner, I believe was his name. Unfortunately, he is from the same area that I grew up in Ohio, which is very tragic. But that's like a really great example about like media, because all of the headlines were about how he was like a successful swimmer and like came from an like well family, like affluent family, and all that stuff. And so that's just another good example of like how media kind of perpetuates and makes excuses for perpetrators, because like it didn't, cool, you're a swimmer, you also sexually assaulted someone, like those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. But that was the kind of narrative that was really spun, was that, and like he's so young, this is gonna like ruin his life, and it's like, well, you kind of like ruin someone else's life, but cool. I highly recommend reading Chanel Miller's memoir called Know My Name. I need to reread it because it's been a while since I read it for the first time, but it is incredible. She does such an amazing job of just like telling her story and how things were done, and like how society and systems like kind of really failed her along the way. So highly recommend reading if you haven't. It's a wonderful book. Okay, anyways, before we go on our break, I love this quote. This is in like my top 5 quotes, I think. And it's just meet people where they are, not where you would like them to be. So our whole, like the core of what we do as advocates is empowerment. And we'll talk way more about that on Saturday. But this quote just really like sums that up. As advocates, like we have a really unique privilege to be able to show up in spaces, and just meet people where they're at. And some people are gonna maybe make make choices or make decisions or be acting in a way that you don't understand or maybe that you don't agree with. But it's not our place to verbalize those things. It's not our place to let that influence then the services that we provide. Our job truly is to meet people where they are. It doesn't matter, what we think they should do. And so I just, yeah, love this quote. And I think it also just shows like, what a unique privilege we have to be able to show up in those spaces. And just support people wherever they may be, and whatever that may look like. So, okay, we're gonna take a little break. So is 5 minutes enough, or do y'all want 10 minutes? What are we feeling?
I'm happy with 5, but also happy with 10.
Okay. I'm seeing two indicators for 5 minutes, so that's what we'll do. We'll come back around 6:30. Okay. Before we move on, any questions about what we've covered thus far? Okay. Beautiful. So now we'll talk about more of that like intersectionality with race and oppression. And so starting off with like stereotypes and how that fuels into oppression and then also rape culture. So we've already talked about how like myths about rapists allow perpetrators to escape responsibility. We, have talked through that, given examples of how we've seen that occur. Another way that society allows, or I can't think of the word, but another way that perpetrators escape responsibilities are also through different stereotypes. So beliefs and behaviors within our society that send messages about certain people. So an example is the belief that people with disabilities are not or cannot be sexual people. That then could relate into not being believed for being sexually assaulted. This is an example of an oppressive stereotype. So again, to be used against.
Also be, they could also be not believed to be a perpetrator.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yes, so oppressive stereotype could be used against the survivor by someone that they're dating to convince them that they won't be believed. So what are some other examples of oppressive stereotypes or just like stereotypes in general that you can think of?
I'm not sure if this is one of them, but it's one of the things that's coming to mind. At times, sometimes people will use certain texts or texts related to like various belief systems and whatnot to try to use that as a way to like make the other person feel like they have to pretty much give sex on demand. And if they don't do it, then whatever happens is on that person, not the attacker.
Yeah. So that like manipulation piece.
Mm-hmm.
What about the stereotype that I've heard that Black women are more sexually free than white women, and therefore they are, there's bias, there's racial bias in the system in terms of how they might, what they report might be taken by law enforcement compared to someone who's white.
Yep, absolutely. An example of that is I don't know how many of you guys have heard of or seen the documentary on Netflix, Surviving R. Kelly. So R. Kelly was like I think rapper, I think some sort of singer. And he had been sexually abusing and exploiting Black women and girls for a very long time, and they were continually not believed. Um, Also a great recommendation to watch if you want to learn more about just like how society views sexual violence and then that intersection with race. So yes, absolutely. What other stereotypes can you all think of?
I think, okay, this one kind of flips the switch, but I think of like the stereotype of like women, young girls are so much more mature, and then that can be used to normalize grooming and very large age gap relationships and rape and so many other things, just because of that one thing, which isn't. But
Yeah, absolutely.
I think another great one is that if you're married, then you can't be sexually abused, or like there's not abuse of that kind in marriage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that idea of like ongoing consent, which is not a thing, but any others? Yeah, so y'all again on top of it. A couple other ones that I just have like written down is like, well, I already talked about Brock Turner, so the fact that he was like a white affluent cisgender male then fed into this, like societal belief of like he could, he couldn't do this or it's gonna like ruin his life. It was just a mistake that he made. Um Also like not what we think of when we think of rapist. That's not the picture that I think many of us have in our minds. So yeah, iniquities and discrimination are laced into our world and everyday life. In some ways that are very blatant and obvious, and then in other ways that are very subtle and like less loud. So it's not enough just to like acknowledge that it exists. We also need to like actively like unpack and dismantle and challenge the oppression, the discrimination that we do see and that we ourselves hold. So that leads then into like, then what does that look like? And so in order to have that like anti-oppression mindset, we want to look at ways that oppression and dominant culture is used by perpetrators to then perpetuate sexual violence and sexual assault. If someone views another race as less than, then in their mind that may justify them in committing that abuse towards that person because they see that person as like not worth being treated in the same way as someone they may view as equal to them. So an example of this is like racist or homophobic name calling creates that atmosphere where human beings that are African American or gay are seen as less than, and then therefore like more deserving of abuse. Oppression is both a cause and effect of sexual violence. Inequality and sexual violence are very much tied. We talk about how the main motivating factor of sexual violence is power and control. And so inevitably there is going to be a power and control difference. And so again, people who commit those acts are likely utilizing and abusing their own power over someone who may have less power in the world within that setting, within that relationship. And that can make it really hard for then a person to report sexual assault or get help. If they, I mean, just think about, a simple example of say it's like a boss. Like how do you know that if you go to HR, your job is going to be safe or that people will believe you? And so just, yeah, keeping that in mind. Let me just see. Yeah, so just knowing that like gender-based violence and race are very much tied to each other. These two pictures do a pretty good job of kind of like, I don't know if you guys are visual learners. I'm very much a visual learner. This does a really great job of kind of seeing like you know, how things just build on and get to what we see today. So we have these like, you know, foundational beliefs that, again, some are very blatant and loud, others are less, you know, others are very subtle. Sometimes we don't even recognize that we may hold that belief or bias, which is what we call like implicit bias. And that's why it's really important just to like continue to challenge yourself. We all have them. It does not make us bad people. The only thing that we can do is be intentional with then challenging those things and being open to newer perspectives, being open to making mistakes and apologizing and learning from those. I can't tell you how many things and how many times that I've been humbled in this job of just like things that I didn't even realize I held within me until it was like kind of right in my face. And then I was like, oh, like, yeah, I like do hold that and I need to like be more intentional. And I need to like really ask myself like why. And that is okay. That's a part of being a human, a good human, and a part of, yeah, just learning and growing. And is really important that we can do that because you're going to meet people from all different walks of life, all different demographics. And so just being aware of those things can make a huge difference with being able to interact with those people and build rapport. Anyways, going back to this, so you can see those attitudes and beliefs that then translate into these different like things that then normalize violence. When violence then is normalized, you have that removal of like autonomy. And so just like I said in the last slide, that idea that someone maybe is less than or is not as valuable as another person. And so therefore it's okay to do things without their consent. And then you see how it just kind of like builds on to all the way up to genocide and murder. On this, this other one kind of shows how I like this one because it talks about how things that seem harmless can actually like really contribute to perpetuating these ideas that harm other individuals. So like problematic language, jokes. I love this of like, it was just a joke. Why do you care? Like sexual violence exists in a pyramid. Your joke contributes to that culture of violence. You're like normalizing it. You're making it something to be like funny and not serious. And that perpetuates that idea then that it's kind of like inevitable and it's going to happen. So when talking then about like social justice, in order to, just like I said, just like a minute ago, in order to challenge those different dynamics and practices and different structures we have, it's really important to actively and intentionally challenge internal and external relationships that perpetuate them. Liberation will and healing is not going to be achievable without accountability, which can be very nerve-wracking. And there's also for sure like a right and a wrong way to do it. Just like whenever, you know, you have two humans who are communicating, there's a way that you can make it really crash and burn. And another way that maybe there's still some like big reactions, but You were respectful and mindful in the way that you approached it. But we have to deliberately and consistently hold ourselves and others accountable, so that abuse can't and won't flourish. So I the example that I sometimes use is, my husband is a high school, middle school teacher. Right now he's like long-term subbing because apparently teacher shortages are everywhere except Spokane. But there was a kid in his class that made some sort of joke, and I don't remember exactly what it was about, but it was around the realm of like domestic violence or like something, or in that. And my husband came home and was telling me this, and I was about to be like, well, did you say anything? But before I even, asked him that, he was like, I called the kid out about it and said like, hey, that's not cool. And like did a little education piece or whatever. And then also was like, do you know what my wife does for work? And so just like, yes, in his position of being a teacher, that's a lot easier to do than, calling a friend or a family member out. But those things are important. And that kid never told a joke like that again in his class. Hopefully he didn't in other spaces either. When he was, faced with like, oh, this is like maybe not a joking matter. But anyways, that's why that's important to, call people out and call ourselves out, like acknowledge when we do make mistakes and then move on and try and do better. And when we work towards that, we're seeking to support the safety, the self-determination, cooperation, equity, and liberation of individuals and communities. And at the end of the day, when we're doing that, like everybody benefits. So we have to shift away from like accepting violence as a means of power and control. So some of you have likely heard these two terms before, equity and equality. So while they are kind of similar, they are different. And so whereas equality is defined as the state or quality of being equal, so same in quantity or degree, value, rank, ability, equity is defined as something that is fair and just. So equity takes individuals and community needs into account. So with equity, you're not going to have the same thing in quantity or degree, value, rank, or ability. But everyone is going to get what they need. And so there's these little pictures that we have up here. So that first one up here, you can see like this is an example of equality. Everyone gets one box, whereas equity is like, oh, the one person doesn't even need a box. The middle guy maybe needs one box. The shortest needs 2 boxes. And so while they got a different quantity of things, they still reached the same end goal, end purpose. Taking it one step further is this down here. So you have that same kind of example. Social justice is taking that next step and being like, why is the fence there? Or can we remove the fence? And so you'll see here then that end goal is like putting a fence in that's like see-through for any height. And then just again, another like example of equality versus equity, like, each one of these people need a different size or different type of bike to fit them. Okay. Any questions so far, or thoughts, comments? Okay. Was everyone able to read the I Racist reading? Okay. Thank goodness I included it in the email. Okay, so within that article, we see the author describing how his aunt can't see her privilege. And so I imagine all of us would say that we do believe racism exists, but we may struggle to identify exactly how we are maybe influenced by systemic racism or even how we benefit from it. It is likely that this just hasn't been something maybe that you've thought of, or again, just like process of learning and growing in life. So the reason why we have you guys read this and whatnot is just to help us understand how like trauma is experienced, and also like how a person's lived experience influences that, and that we can then enter those different spaces with an understanding rather than maybe like judgment. And so, think of, you may enter a space where the survivor is very much not wanting to talk to law enforcement. Maybe you get someone on the phone who doesn't even want to go to the hospital. And in your mind, you're thinking like, you should go to the hospital. Like, you could, like, your health is really important. There may be a very valid reason why they don't feel safe going to the hospital that maybe you have not experienced. And so that's not the first thing then that you think of. So again, it's just that practice of knowing that everyone has and everyone brings different lived experiences and different, just like things that they've gone through that influences decision making and influences then that aftermath of trauma. So, I'm gonna split y'all into 2 different breakout rooms, so there'll be 3 of you in each. I'll send these questions in the chat as well. I also sent the slides, so if you're able to pop the slides up, that will work. But I will put these in the chat, break you out in breakout rooms. And then you'll spend about a half hour talking through these 3 questions, and then we'll come back and just kind of hear from each group kind of what y'all talked about for each of these things. So give me a second here. I'm going to stop recording.